How you doing today, Grandpa?
I'm real good.
That's good. That's good. It's a good day. We had some good tacos, quesadillas today. That was pretty delicious. I didn't know that you can't handle spicy food though.
I don't care for spicy, but this place makes them real good.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. All right. Well, I have some questions about you regarding your kids and stuff. My dad is your only son and everything, but I don't really know too much about my other aunts and sisters. So I was curious, Aunt Carrie is your firstborn child. What's your favorite memory that you have with Carrie?
Of Carrie, I remember one time when we were going over to her grandparents' house and a little dog got hit by a car right in front of us. So I had to stop and she jumped out and sat right next to the dog so another car wouldn't come and hit it.
Dang.
And I thought, boy, what a soft heart she's got.
Would you have just driven past the car or the dog or something? Or?
No, but the idea that she jumped out and sat so no other cars could hit the dog that was her character to put the dog ahead of herself. She's really a soft-hearted person.
Oh, that's so sweet. And then also Tommy's your first grandkid too, right?
You know, I was a firefighter at the time, and my first grandson was born, and we were heading to the hospital to see him, and we run across an enormous fire that the fire department hadn't even been called yet or anything.
Mm-hmm.
So we stopped and watched the fire before I went and seen my grandson. And I never lived that one down.
I mean, your grandson's gonna be there forever. I mean, that fire is only there for so long. So I understand your perspective there. That's funny. Well, I was also curious about what's your favorite memory with Lori.
Lori was always really soft-hearted, but she was always the first one to come and jump up on my lap, and very loving person. And there's nothing in the world like having 4 daughters. If she finds the injured animal, she wants to help it. And if we're driving along and we see an animal hit on the side of the road, she's ready to stop and give it first aid and take it home and keep it in her house till it recovers. So.
Mm-hmm. All right, so what's your favorite memory that you have with Nancy?
She was a very independent person. She didn't really like authority too much. She did her own thing, which is okay because I always thought that to raise good children, they had to think on their own. So that was her. She kind of did her own thing. She would pick on her sisters and try to blame them for it when they were really little.
I heard that she was the biggest prankster out of all of them.
One day she was screaming at one of her sisters. This is when they were little. Was hitting her, and I went out and looked, and she was standing there hitting herself, yelling that it was her sister hitting her.
It sounds like something you do. Wait, which one of your daughters crashed the car through the house? Oh my God.
That was Carrie's friend that did that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and since then, several years, maybe 7 years ago, I met the friend that did it. Her and Carrie were out cruising, and her friend had borrowed this car from a boy, and it didn't have any brakes on. So they were coming home, and they pulled into the driveway, and the car wouldn't stop, and it knocked, and so it bashed in the wall on my house.
But did it go into the kitchen?
I asked the lady that did that, cause so this is not too many years ago, and she said I never dated him after that. So I was glad to hear that.
Thank God that's the only person that ever used your own house as brakes for their car.
Yeah.
Um, what's your favorite memory that you have with Tammy?
Tammy spent most of her young life sitting on my lap. She was probably the most loving person demonstrating her love. So almost all the time she was sitting on my lap, or and she could memorize every commercial she saw on television.
Sounds
So
like her.
she was always really good in school, and especially in mathematics. And so finally she found her niche in what she's doing now, which is making spreadsheets and putting numbers together. She tried a few things before that, but when she got into that, it was her thing. Probably Lori had the biggest problem in school. The other girls, they just pretty much picked it up, and Carrie could get straight A's, and I never saw her do any homework. And so, but Lori she had problems in school, and Tammy was always great at math, so she didn't have any problems.
That's good. So they just kind of helped each other out then when
Yeah.
it came to school. Did you do much teaching to them in terms of school stuff, or more just like life lessons? Or
Well, there's a few times that they needed to be set straight, but I'm not going to go into that.
fair enough. Fair enough.
I prefer memories where they were perfect.
Oh yeah, then I almost forgot about your last child, Bobby.
Bobby he was always with me. He started going hunting with me when he was about 4 years old. We would go up at the time I was into bow hunting, and so we would go up north bow hunting together, and he was like my sidekick. And when he got into his teens and got got out on his own, I really missed him because he kind of had me spoiled. I always had a hunting buddy and a fishing buddy, and so when he got out on his own, I really missed that. I remember one time that I bought a camp, or him and I just went tent camping up north, and we had so much fun, and so I came home and bought a camper, and that's about the time he decided that Dad wasn't the most important thing in his life, so we never did go camping in that camper.
Aw. Anyway, at least you had grandkids that made up for that in the future.
Oh, yeah.
So that,
Oh yeah.
thank God, that was a blessing right there. Now to the more general questions that I have. I'm just curious about is here's one. What was your first job that you had when you were growing up?
My first job was working on a farm.
Uncle Bob's farm?
No,
Oh,
we lived down by Benton Harbor, and the neighbor had peaches and stuff, and so my first job where I actually was away from home was working in peaches or grading tomatoes, stuff like that.
how old were you?
Probably 14.
14. How much you get paid?
I can't remember. Back then it wasn't much, but by them standards, it was enough for me to go get a Coke and a bag of potato chips every day and things like that. But
Ah, I see.
and then my second job was a carry-out boy in a grocery store, and I did that for about 3 years. And then when I got out of high school, my dad was a union official at the factory, and he didn't believe in somebody not having a job when they got out of school. So he said at that time there were several factories around, and so he said, "You gonna go get a job, or you gonna move out?"
Is that when you started working for Whirlpool?
Yeah, that's when I started working for Whirlpool. In fact, I was on what they called at the time co-op, so I'd go to school about the last 6 months of my senior year. I'd go in the morning, and then I'd go work in the factory in the afternoon.
Oh, that's really cool. Interesting. How about what was your first car that you got? Is it when you were younger?
First,
Your first car.
my first car. My older brother was in the army, so he'd drive a car home, and then he'd stay too long, and so he'd have to take the train or the bus back, and so he left his car there. So the first three cars I had were his.
Did he know that?
No, well, he actually knew it, but he instructed me not to drive him when he was gone. But once he was gone, what he didn't know didn't hurt him.
Did you ever try to drive it in reverse to get the mileage back down?
No, I just figured I'd bite the bullet when he got home.
Man, that's risky. Ooh. All right. Well, here's another question: is now that we're talking about like when you were younger, but what's like the biggest difference from when you were a kid compared to today?
The biggest difference was when I was a kid. I grew up in a house that kids weren't threatened by outside influences, and so when I grew up, the only instruction we had was as and we lived on a farm. The only instruction we had was be home by dark or call and say why you're not. We could leave at any time as soon as it got daylight and go out and go around the neighborhood and stuff. And if we met a friend and wanted to spend the night or something, we'd call home. But as long as we were home by dark, that was the only real stress thing we did that we had. And nowadays, of course, kids are in danger of some bad people, so
Yeah.
they can't do that anymore. But back when I was growing up, that wasn't a problem.
Back in the day.
People were more respectful, and they had, if somebody was in a community and caused a problem, the community took care of them. So we didn't have any fear of neighbors or somebody driving through, because that was just not existing. Maybe in the big cities it wasn't, but out in the country, people didn't get out of line because the neighbors would solve the problem.
That makes sense. Interesting. If you were to like go back in time to when you were young, what's like one skill that you would learn that you didn't like get to learn?
To read better.
Read better?
I'm not a very good reader. I had one teacher that, well, she was my teacher until I was a third grade, and she was really a good teacher. Kind of after that, my dad, it was a small school district, and so there was only one country school, and when he got to be the director of the school district, there was two teachers. One teacher went up to the fourth grade, and the other teacher went to the eighth grade, from fourth to the eighth grade. And while he was director, they added a teacher for the kindergarten and first grade. So anyway, the teachers were afraid of my father because he controlled their jobs. Not that he was a mean man or anything, but they thought that, I mean, he had the control of the school. So us kids could get away with anything with the teachers, not knowing, nobody informed the teachers that if we got out of line and the teacher went to my father, it'd been us that suffered the consequences, not the teacher. So we didn't bother to tell the teachers that. So
Is that why you're not that good at reading?
yes,
So you could just get away with just.
I could get away with just about anything because the teachers were, they were needed their job and they
Yeah.
thought, well, if I punish his kids, I could lose my job. Well, my dad was of the old school that if you have kids that are out of line, they should be straightened out, not the teachers.
Yeah, there we go. Also, forgot that you also had brothers and sisters growing up too, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, it was. I know you guys did a lot of crazy stuff back in the day.
yeah. Well, it was. I had two older brothers, and they kind of used me for the guinea pig when they wanted to test out a theory that they weren't too sure about. They figured if I survived, they could. So, and my sisters, they were in the house most of the time, or one of my sisters, if she was going to come outside and play, we had to go round up all the farm cats around and put them in a chicken coop that wasn't being used because she was scared to death of cats.
Oh, that's funny.
But all in all, it was a good round family, But my sisters were in the house most of the time, doing little girl stuff.
Is there like any I remember we talked about this before, but is there like any everyday items from your childhood that are worth a lot of money now? Like I know that you guys used to buy a lot of comic books back then.
We used to have every Superman comic book that ever was printed, and Superman was our big hero, but we had other ones too. But when I was 16, we moved off to the farm into town, and most of them those that weren't destroyed by four boys were just left laying there on the floor, and so if we had them now, we probably could retire early.
I heard that you guys used them as toilet paper. Is that true?
Not with comic books. That was with Sears catalogs.
Oh, okay. That sounds about
At that time, Sears catalog was about 2 inches thick,
Oh, yeah, that's a lot of wiping paper.
so we had an outhouse for the boys, and of course the women and mother and girls got to use the bathroom in the house, and so that's where the Sears catalog went.
So they had a proper bathroom, and you guys had to just make do outside, basically?
Yeah. I mean, if nobody was in the bathroom in the house, it wasn't like us kids couldn't use it, but usually we ended up out in the outhouse. The Sears catalog came in pretty handy. There was a hill about 2 miles from our house, and it was really a still steep hill in the road, and it went on for probably a mile. So we'd build go-karts, and one of us would have to go down at the end of that hill and stop traffic. So then we'd take our go-karts and go down the hill, and you'd get going really fast because it was a steep hill. And
Was there brakes?
No.
No brakes?
I mean, it run out of steam before we got to where they stopped the cars, but
Anyone ever get hurt doing that, or?
no, never did.
Wow. That's surprising. What did you guys use for wheels? Did you just, find scraps?
Usually they came off lawnmowers and stuff like that.
Wow.
And the body would be a wooden box that you put grapes in usually, and boards from wherever we found boards.
Have steering wheels?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. So who, like, did all of you guys build that together, or was like... Or
Yeah, we it was kind of a family project, but I guess I can't remember if we each had one. I doubt if we each had one because we didn't have that many wheels. But so it was a family thing to build them.
Interesting.
So I don't remember us all having our own though. But
Uh,
kids, they could do things back then, and you didn't have to worry about getting hurt. If you got hurt, you just got up and got on the thing again and tried not to get hurt that time. It wasn't like you had to wear all kinds of padding and stuff.
Olivia was interested about this, but what were your favorite cookies throughout your life? Like your cookies, your number one favorite? Because I know it's changed.
Well, in later years it was pecan sandies. Probably in early years it was either homemade chocolate chip or oatmeal cookies. I still really love oatmeal cookie dough that isn't cooked.
Ooh, never.
One of my granddaughters and one of my nieces try to keep me supplied with that, but sometimes I run out because I can't ration it long enough in between. So if one of my other grandkids decided to learn how to make oatmeal cookie dough.
Look at Gracie. She worked in a cookie
Why are you
shop.
looking at Olivia the whole time while you're saying that? Well, what's the biggest fish you've ever caught?
The biggest fish I ever caught was probably 35-inch northern. I was on a fishing trip up into Canada, and so that would have they were the northern pike up there are they'll bite on anything, so they're easy to catch, and so that's probably the biggest fish. The biggest bass I ever caught, which is really what I love to do, is bass fishing. I didn't weigh him, but I've seen 4-pound bass, and he was right up there about probably a 4-pound bass.
Wow.
But I didn't weigh him because I ate him.
You were just 4 pounds heavier the next day.
What's your favorite fishing memory overall?
My favorite fishing memory overall was, I think 7 times I've gone up on a fishing trip into northern Minnesota and what they call the boundary waters up there. And there's no motors allowed, and there's a million lakes that are most of them are connected by little streams and stuff, but the water starts up in the mountains in Canada and ends up down in Lake Superior. So there's lakes all the way down, and so we'd go through an outfitter and get canoes and go out and stay someplace out there and just live off of the fish we caught. So that was one of my favorite fish stories. I've been to Canada and I had a good time up there fishing. And of course, fishing with my grandkids is always a heartwarming thing for me.
Mm-hmm. Do you have any particular favorite memories from fishing with some of your grandchildren?
Well, I remember one time where I was Olivia and Grace, I think somebody else was there, and they decided that it was so crowded, so Cody got a board and he was just floating around on the lake. He had his line in, but if he'd have caught a big pike, I'd had to go chase him down or something to save him.
Oh man, yeah, that was a fun time. Yeah, it was me, Ethan, Olivia, and Grace, all with you that day. Yeah, that was really fun. Yeah, I remember I brought the paddleboard. I was so hot, I was sweating. I saw the biggest fish. I didn't know what it was. It was about this big though. I was trying to follow it around with my paddleboard, but it kept on getting away from me.
There's some creatures in Duck Lake.
Yeah. You ever fall in the water while you're fishing?
I tend to do that quite often.
What? Really?
One kind of funny story was we were coming in, my brother and my nephew and I were coming in from fishing, and I reached out to catch the pier when the boat come up to it, and, and the boat hit some seaweeds and just suddenly stopped, and so I went in. I went on up the shore, went up in my truck, and come back with dry clothes, and kind of surprised everybody. What do you do? Carry dry clothes in your truck? I says I always have them because, I never know when it's gonna happen. And another kind of funny story when I was fishing with one of my grandsons we didn't want to quit fishing when it got really hot, so we stayed out there and it got really, really hot. So I took my wallet and stuff out of my pocket and keys out and dove in the water and then I couldn't get my belly up over the side of the boat to get back in. So my grandson had to drive the boat up to shallow water so I could get back in the boat. So we left our trees, his tree at my house, and so my nephew walked in the house with that little scrub of sticks and told his mama that's the tree he wanted. And I got a phone call about 5 minutes later saying, "Bring that tree over here."
No. No, this was a big mistake.
That's hilarious.
That's probably one of my favorite Christmas stories.
That sounds like a good prank. Oh man. How about your favorite one here? Because every year.
My favorite one here, well, I have, of course, the favorite thing is having my whole family here on Christmas Eve. That's the highlight of Christmas for me.
I'd have to agree.
I can't think of one particular thing other than just having the whole family here for Christmas Eve.
All us grandkids, we used to try to open our presents as fast as possible, but now we've realized that we just like hanging out here with all the family, so we try to push it back as much as possible to delay opening presents so we could spend more time together.
Yeah, that was always a little bit of thing of tension between Grandma and me, because I would have liked to start about noon when all the kids were here and maybe they'll open one Christmas present an hour.
Yeah.
That's a good idea.
But Grandma didn't see it that way. She said, "Wait."
I might have to agree with Grandma on that one.
So kids would say, "Can I open a present now, Grandpa?" I said, "Go talk to your grandma."
Well, does it make sense to you to eat just one pecan sandy an hour?
Yeah.
Or do you eat them all at once?
It's probably not possible.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Did Grandma make you be Santa Claus, or did you volunteer to be Santa Claus that one year? Remember you were Santa Claus
At the library?
Yeah.
It was not my idea.
You make a good Santa Claus though.
I probably did, but it was not my idea. I'll tell you the truth. The truth of the story about that is, and the kids would come and tell me what they wanted, and I'm supposed to tell them that if they're good, they'll get what they want. Well, we live in a fairly poor area here, and a lot of these families, if kids got a new pair of socks, it'd be their Christmas present. So I'm promising them something that they would never get, and I didn't like that. That's really why I didn't like to be Santa Claus.
That makes sense.
Is leading these kids to think that they're going to get something when I know darn well the parents couldn't afford it.
Grandma, I was asking Grandpa how you guys first met and your first date.
I saw him in study hall. He was sitting up there. We had to study hall. Sitting about 3 rows ahead of me, or 4 rows, whatever. And I had another friend who was named Richard Kramer. And we were just really good friends. But one day, Richard and him were talking. And Richard would kind of mentor me because I had trouble with, I forgot which subject. So he would kind of try to help me. So one day they were talking at the end of study hall. So I like bumped into him. I said, "Hey, Richard, I passed my social studies test or whatever." And I'm like, "Oh, sorry I interrupted." And that's how I met him.
And I've been interrupted ever since.
I was the investigator. Yep.
He said he was very shy though. He couldn't.
Oh, bull.
Bold. Calling BS on you for being shy, I guess.
Not with me.
I always thought I had a black corduroy
jacket.
coat with cigarettes hanging out the pocket. And I always thought she thought I was tough.
No, I can just saw you from the back. So.
Thought you were a jughead or something.
I did love that jacket.
That's a cool jacket. Dang.
Yep.
He said that the reason that you guys might have gone together is because you both thought that you guys were rich.
Well, he just moved to this beautiful big house, and my dad had his own business. So.
Why do you hate tomatoes so much?
Well, they really. Why I don't like them, or the reason I don't eat them, is because they bother my stomach. But the story about me not liking tomatoes was, my mother was canning tomatoes one day, and I was probably 7 or 8 at the time, and she so she was peeling tomatoes to can them, and my 2 older brothers probably did something that made her mad and blamed it on me, because when I came in the house, I knew I was in trouble right away, and I smarted off to my mother. And then I ducked, and I never should have ducked, because when that tomato hit the wall, I was even in more trouble.
So it's a curse.
Would you consider that a curse?
A curse?
Yeah.
The curse of the tomato, yes.
Is that why you don't like broccoli, asparagus?
Are those also curses? The other vegetables you don't like?
I
I'm just picky.
learned that if your mother throws a tomato at you, you're much better off just to stand there and take it.
Well,
That was one of life's lessons.
What was your guys' first house? Like, how did that, like, how much was it, like, even? Like, because I know houses were cheap back then, like, compared to now, at least.
I forgot. How much was our first house?
Hmm?
How much was our first house? What did our first house cost?
How much did your guys' first house cost?
13,900.
What? You'd get a crappy car with that money. Now, at least.
Yeah. Well, back then
Yeah.
you only made like $4 an hour
$4 an hour.
if you were lucky.
We actually bought the house before we were married because I didn't want to rent. I never thought renting was a good idea. So, and my dad, he was believed the same way. So we actually bought the house like a month before we got married, just because we got a deal and could buy it, you know.
And they were friends of my parents.
So we never did rent our whole life.
Yeah, they were friends of my parents, and then their oldest son and I were the same age. And when I was a child on Beck Road, which was our second house, we had a group of us that played together. And it was actually his house at that time, where he lived with his parents. Yeah, so it was really cool.
That was interesting.
How's your wedding?
Wait, before that question, how did you propose to Grandma?
He didn't.
I went and asked her father if it'd be okay.
But we already
Back in
decided.
them days, that's what you did.
But there was no, like, you know, like now they make it a big deal to, like, get down on one knee in the most beautiful
No,
place.
it was a mutual
Yeah,
mutual thing. But
I just knew we were.
back in those days, you asked the father, and I did that.
But he was scared.
He was scared?
Scared of my dad. To ask him. Because I was daddy's girl, of course.
Was Grandma's dad scary?
Was he scary? No, but he didn't.
The heck?
I wouldn't have wanted to mess with one of his daughters. You know,
Well, the others were like 9 and 10.
he was a family guy too, and thought family was everything. So I showed him the respect that he would expect.
That's good.
Okay, now how was your wedding?
Yeah, how was your guys' wedding?
Or where was it?
We're too young to remember that wedding. We couldn't make it.
My brothers were ushers.
Well, Uncle Don at the time
High
was
school. Fred was my best man.
the
Big
dad
deal?
at the
Oh, it
Catholic
was a
Church
big
in
affair.
Watervliet, yeah.
A lot of partying,
Oh yeah. Well, come on.
Irish, and yeah, that
And
makes,
Italian.
yeah, that's
Yeah, my one cousin, he was kind of a heavy drinker, and my nephew wet his pants. He was a baby, and he wet his pants. His mother put his pants in the dryer, and
At his parents.
my one cousin he'd been hitting the wine pretty so long, and was sitting there. He thought he was watching television, but
Was the dryer.
all he was watching was the glass window of the dryer and the pants going
Is that
around.
our pictures or just the?
I saw your picture. You
No,
were
it's not
stunner
the
back
picture
then.
one.
Yeah, I
Got the
never
wrong
seen
one.
you young in color.
Young in color, was I black and white?
Yes.
Yeah, did you guys dream in black and white when black and white television was a thing?
Oh yeah, I always dreamt in color, vivid color,
Vivid color.
vivid color.
Have you had some weird? I've heard one of your dreams. One time we were at the cabin, and we woke up in that morning, and I was telling you about my dream, and you're like, "Yeah, I had a weird dream too. That I was a robot that could only make left turns." And that's probably one of the strangest dreams I've ever heard of. But it sounds like something that you would dream.
Well, I had a toy that was a robot that only would make left turns. But I still have some corny dreams, though.
You do? Did they ever involve any other family members or anything goofy?
Yeah, sometimes there's no rhyme or reason for them, but some of them get pretty violent, and I throw my arms and legs and feet around and fighting bad guys, and
That's pretty cool. You live in
I still
Kansas.
have them kind of dreams sometimes, not too often, but I think a couple nights ago I had one. Quite often in my dreams, I'm like a FBI agent or something.
Yeah, what work?
Some kind of a superhero type person.
What work did you do for the CIA back in the '60s? You want to come clean right now?
Well, what?
What work did you do for the CIA back in the '60s? You want to come clean for us?
He's gonna play dumb.
I trying to keep the Italians out of the meatball industry, but I didn't.
Sounds about right. As a
Well, it
Sicilian.
didn't work, Grandpa.
Because once they started putting tomatoes in the meatballs, I couldn't eat them anymore. So it was kind of a personal thing.
You had to go rogue.
But it's easy.
What's your favorite memory you have of that you had as a firefighter?
My favorite memory as a firefighter. Well, I could tell you the first lesson I learned as a firefighter was that the house might be $300,000 mansion, or it might be a
Little shack.
$500 shack. But to the people that own it, the $500 shack is probably more important to them than the $300,000 house.
Really?
That was one of my first lessons, that you pull up on a fire and you think, well, they're not really losing anything, but the rich, the people that got a lot of money, the things didn't mean near as much to them as poor people that had family pictures or a few family heirlooms that from parents that have passed on or something in there and lost it.
Did you ever get to work with your own son as a firefighter?
Work with my son?
Yeah.
No, I don't. I was off the fire department when he got on, so I really never worked with him. In my later years, I was in charge of the fires most of the time, so I wasn't physically carrying a hose. The first worst thing that I can remember with a family member was when your Uncle Jeff got on and I was backing him up with a nozzle and we were fighting a big barn fire, and the backup guy has to watch the surroundings all the time, plus watch the front guy, the nozzle guy, and I seen that barn wall start caving in, so I grabbed Uncle Jeff and yanked him back just before the wall fell in. So that was, that's probably the most scary thing as far as family that I can think of.
Sounds like the scariest thing, period, to me.
Well, it's,
That was one.
and when you're in charge of a fire, you're you're telling people
Yeah.
what to do, and a lot of times it's putting them at risk.
And you're the one responsible for it, in a sense.
So,
yeah.
well, I accepted the responsibility, but by accepting the responsibility, I told myself never to tell a firefighter to do something I wouldn't do myself. So that's how I justified being able to do that. I
Yeah.
think that at one time or another, all of my kids were in jobs where they were helping people. That always gave me a warm spot in my heart because all of my kids are very warm, giving people, and they've all been in jobs where they help other people, and sometimes even more than they help themselves. Carrie's a MA, medical assistant. And Tammy she worked in a daycare center for a long time, and Nancy, of course, is dedicated to giving everything to disadvantaged children that she can, and your dad, of course, he started out as a firefighter and a paramedic, and now he's working in the school, which is all dedicating our lives to making life better for somebody else.
Yeah.
And Lori she was an ambulance technician, and so that's all very heartwarming to me. Like, makes me feel like I did a good job raising them, and they've pretty much passed that on to their kids. So what more could a grandpa ask?
Now I also had one question that none of the grandkids ask about this, and I'm always very concerned because I feel like it's gonna lost through time, but not many of us know about the family history, outside of grandma and grandpa, and then who came after that, or who was before you guys and all your ancestors before. I'll ask you a lot of questions usually about people in the family tree. Is there any notable ancestors that we had?
People
I just wanted to
maybe the
confirm
backgrounds.
that we were related to Abraham Lincoln. That's all. Just
Abraham
on
Lincoln
the record.
was related to my mother's family, several times removed, but
Mm-hmm.
but the family tree dates back to Abraham Lincoln.
And
Interesting.
you see how tall and gangly he is, and that's how Uncle Bob was built too. You can see that in them.
Really?
Yeah.
And
Bob
Interesting.
was built big like that.
the family tree dates back to the Mayflower, and they've lived in this area forever since they left New York back in the 1800s. They've lived in this area. My dad was at one time he was union vice president, the school board director, the head of the county political party. So he was really involved in making things better for people too.
I said he had a big heart and he was just a
Yeah,
sweet
he
man.
did.
And if anybody come to the door, they'd come in and he'd feed them. Back then, now it's.
Did he speak Italian?
Only when him and my uncle, my grandfather, were telling dirty jokes, they didn't want us kids to understand. Otherwise, he always spoke English.
Who is the family member that fought in the Cowboy Indian Wars?
My mother's grandfather.
Did you hear any cool stories about him?
The only, this is a family story that was handed down, that when he came home from out west, he got to Chicago and the only clothes he had were his leathers. And before they'd let him on the train in Chicago to come to Michigan, he had to get a suit. So he had to go buy a suit, and he still had his gun. Unless I gave it to your dad, I have his boot knife.
I think we have his arrow that he brought back.
And you have an arrow. Yeah. After he got home, he was a barrel and a bucket maker when he came home, and so that's what when he was living here on the farm when my grandma was little, he was a barrel maker. But that's after he'd come home from out west and got tired of fighting the Indians and fighting wars, I guess.
Yeah. Did you, as a kid, you ever meet anyone from the 1800s?
My grandmother and my grandfather were both.
What were those people like, just as a character, like as a person? Because I never got to meet anyone.
Self-sufficient.
Self-sufficient.
Yeah. My grandfather, my dad's father, stayed with us for about a year, maybe 2 years, when I was 7 or 8 years old. Remember, he had a Model T, and my dad put an electric starter on it. I remember that, but whenever he'd go any place, we always wanted to go with him to ride in that Model T.
Was that like a vintage car at that point for you guys?
It was, that was long past the Model T days, so we were really thought we were cool to ride in it with him. It had horsehair seats. It was just a cool car just because it was old,
Yeah, I could imagine.
And my grandmother, on my mother's side, my mother's mother, she was an old farm lady, and she was pretty set in her ways. I used to come up and stay with my grandmother for a week or two in the summertime, and my great-grandmother lived a mile up the road, so I'd bring my bike when I come up, and every day I'd ride up to my great-grandmother's house and help my uncle feed his pigs and cows. And I never could get the knack for milking cows, but I'd be out there when he was milking the cows, and once in a while catch a squirt of raw milk up in the face. I do remember my great-grandmother, every day when I'd go up there, there'd be a fresh-made pie laying on the cooling shelf.
Is it one of those where you're in the yard and the smell hits you and you're like floating towards the pie?
I'm just like nowadays, I'm sure they thought the same way, that these kids are growing up and they're going to screw up the whole world, just like everybody thinks. And they probably thought the same thing about my parents, but they were, most everybody that lived back then was pretty self-sufficient. They didn't really depend on other people for anything.
Do you enjoy the retired life more than when you were working? Or do you kind of...
Oh, yes.
Yeah?
Like I told you before, when I got out on my own, I got a job in a factory, and I'm basically an outside person, and I was like reporting into jail every day for the rest of my life till I got out of there. And so when I went to work for the ambulance company, it was more like I'm out on my own, and I really liked that. But being locked in that factory every day it was really terrible.
How long did you work at that factory?
36 years.
This happens when you have a family.
Did you work at the factory and as a firefighter at the same time at any point?
Yeah. It was it's on-call fire department. So when they had enough firefighters. So when you were working, there was firefighters around, and when you're home, the other firefighters would be working. So when they staffed the fire department, it was like, like when I got on, they needed afternoon firefighters, and I was available in the afternoon, so that's one reason they put me on.
When you're a firefighter, was that your favorite job that you've had overall, or did you like any other jobs particularly more?
Probably. Yeah. I enjoyed fighting fires a lot more than I enjoyed
Managing.
being in charge.
Yeah.
But
Also, I never knew this. Who was your best friend growing up?
Grandma.
Grandma?
I had some hunting buddies and some fishing buddies. But as far as a deep friendship, I didn't really have them deeply involved in friendships other than my family. My family was always my comfort. I didn't have to go outside of my family for comfort.
Is it surprising to you that you got to see your great-grandkids? That must be...
And great-great-grandchildren.
Wait, really? Who?
Yeah.
We don't have great-greats. Unless Bella's had a child.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Bella would have had a child for you to have great-great-grandchildren.
Unless there's something he's not
Unless you're
telling
somebody
us.
else that we don't know.
I'm waiting, but
She's 16. And if you talk to Tony, he's probably going to come shoot you.
my great-grandkids are getting up there in age where if I can hang around for a while.
That's true. That's true.
Is there a message you'd want to leave to the world?
Message I want to leave to the world.
If you had
Now
one.
we're getting deep. Now I got to think of this.
That's why you put your thinking cap on
taxing you.
before this interview. It's a good thing we did. We found it.
Probably, if there's one thing that I would like my grandkids and great-grandkids and kids, which they do already. I'm not saying they don't, but treat people the way you want to be treated, because I know a lot of people that were not good parents, and now that they're grown up, their kids are not all that good kids. I mean,
They don't know.
they're good kids, but they don't treat everybody with respect. So as you're growing up, treat other people the way you want to be treated when you're that age. That's probably the one lesson that I would leave to everybody. Yesterday, my therapist asked what kind of support I have at home.
Yeah.
And I said, look at that pillow and look at the wall over here. That's my support system.
She said, holy cow, how many do you have?
And
That was funny.
so that's the lesson, treat the people the way you want to be treated in your later life.
You think you'll go out fishing this summer at all?
We already did once.
Well, I'm still have hopes. I hope that if I get up to Mayo Clinic, they have some answers for that. I don't know. I really don't. I kind of wish, in a way, I wish I knew what was going to happen, but I don't. Like I told my doctor the other day, if I'm going to end up in a wheelchair the rest of my life, I'd like to know that,
Yeah.
but Mayos, they work miracles sometimes, so I'm hoping they come up with something. If they don't, I probably won't get much better than I am now, so.
Yeah, maybe we'll have to turn you into a robot that could only make left turns.
Make a right turn. So
Make a
not
right
left
turns?
turn.
Okay. I bet
Otherwise
you
he
we can
can't
do
go to
that.
the kitchen.
You'll just have to right turn your way to Duck Lake with us then. That'd be
That
fun.
was a political joke, by the way.
Okay.
Oh, man.
Yeah, I would. I haven't given up hope that I'll get to go fishing again, but
I'll make sure it'll happen.
Livy and Aunt Lori and I went fishing the other day, and we just couldn't find a place where all three of us could comfortably sit on shore and fish. But since then, I figured one out. So one of these days, when Aunt Lori's here and Livy's here, we're gonna go to this other place, and so we can all have our own room to cast and let our fish bait land and stuff. And it's awful hard on a spot where one car could back a boat in for three people to be able to fish.
Yeah, and a tree right above us.
Yeah.
I got an idea. How about we buy a trailer? Grandpa gets on the golf cart or whatever, and we load it, and Grandpa drives the golf cart onto the trailer. Then we truck it all the way over to Duck Lake, and he gets off the trailer. We have a wheelchair waiting at the dock. There's one.
Now the weeds are so bad out there that
Oh, really?
can't even hardly get the boat out. But
Yeah.
so I don't know. Usually I go out and clean it out, but this year, since I'm not stable enough to even get on the boat, I haven't done that. So I haven't given up hope, but
Think you still make it to the cabin this year?
Hmm?
Still make it to the cabin this year?
well, I sure hope so.
We'll try to make it happen.
But still, it bothers me to see everybody else doing all the work when I've always believed that if you go, you carry your own weight,
Mm-hmm.
and it's hard to do.
Yeah. Yeah, that is. But for me, it's an excuse to see you more often. I know, well, we were talking about this yesterday, but when you're talking about all this, when I was a kid, and you tell me all those stories about Tony and you, the Boundary Waters, or whatever, and then the last thing you said about it was, don't you dare ever get married, because then I never see Tony anymore, because he has all these damn children, and never see him. And so, I mean, I'm so busy now with everything I do, but this gives me at least something to be like, I can
Well,
call off a day or two, like a
yeah.
week or every few weeks to see.
I don't begrudge anybody because, that even though, like my kids, I love to see them. I love them to have them here. And the same with all of you guys, too. But when you got your own life, that's got to be priority. I want that to be your priority,
Oh, yeah.
not me, You got wife and kids, you got to take care of them. I'm secondary after you guys get married. It's hard, it's hard to see you guys all get out on your own, but I'm glad you do that.
Well, me, Ethan, and Olivia wouldn't be hanging out right now. So, I mean, I'm glad to be here personally.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love to see that too. There's not too many families that, most families I know, they don't do that. Like you and Ethan, or you like each other. Actually, is what it gets down to. A lot of families, they don't like each other.
Yeah, it's true.
Some of the therapists that come here to work on me, they have terrible families. Some of them get along with their parents, some don't.
Mm-hmm.
Some like get along with their kids, some don't. Some get along with this kid, but not that kid.
Yeah.
I know Aunt Bunny, Grandma and I was up there for the 4th of July or some holiday one time. And Aunt Bunny had 3 sisters, and invariably, after about 10 minutes of being together, one would be out in the car crying because the other ones hurt their feelings. And I mean, it's common.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm one of the only people that I know that actually enjoys going to family gatherings.
Yeah.
And that's surprising to me. And I feel like the odd one out that I'm the only one that's not like annoyed to see my family the like one time or like, the like 4 times a year that everyone's together. Like, for some reason everyone dreads that. But for me, I look forward to it a lot because everyone's pretty nice here and I get along with everyone.
And I want you to have your own life too,
Mhm.
Like I say, I'm secondary, so after your family, like if your dad or your mom need you, I want you there, not here with me. Kind of like that kind of a thing,
Yeah. So I guess let's end on top of a meatball song. Yeah. 1, 2. On top of a meatball. Oh. I can start over. I started meatball. I'm stupid. How about you start it, Grandpa? I can't.
Okay, we're gonna sing the other family song.
Okay.
Week after week, you're gonna be showed another thrilling episode of Grandpappy Jer and the girls and the boys of the family known as the Tarantinos.
I've never heard that
I've
one.
never even heard
Well,
that
thank you.
Thank you.
This was a pleasure.
It
I love
was.
you, Grandpa.
Love you, Grandpa.
Love you, Grandpa.
Bye.